Welcome back, everyone. Let's go ahead and do a comparison between the iPhone 7 and the 7 Plus in 2021. Now, I actually haven't done one of these yet, and I'm obsessed with doing them right now, so let's just get into it. Now, if you want to pick up either one of these things, links are down in the description. Get them from there and help support the channel at the same time. Now, theoretically, when it comes down to it, this was the first generation of devices where it was like, the bigger phone isn't just a bigger phone, that's not the only feature it has. There's also a couple of more improvements. You had more RAM, you had a bigger camera, or more cameras at that, bigger battery, things like that. So the smaller phone was actually, having less features than the bigger one, which is pretty interesting. And this is the first time we saw it at this large of a scale. Now, side by side, you can definitely see quite a bit of a difference. The iPhone 7 Plus is far bigger. This was a personal phone that I owned, not this exact one, but I did have a 7 Plus that I used as my main device, and I loved it. That 5.5-inch panel on the front looks very good. Home button looks very good. I mean, it doesn't look outdated, and I'm still a fan of the way this phone looks for sure. Now with the iPhone 7, this phone also still looks extremely good as well. I have very few complaints about it. I mean, it's a smaller phone, yes, and there's quite a bit of bezel around it, but between the two, there's a lot of similarities. When it comes down to both of these, they're more similar than not, in my opinion. So, in terms of that, that covers it up there. In terms of the thickness and thickness between the two, almost the same exact thing as well. Like, I really don't see that big of a difference between these two. They feel almost the same type of size in terms of the thickness factor. And on the back, quite a bit of a difference. You have the same type of texture and material on both, but that camera setup up top is the bigger difference. You have that dual camera setup, telephoto lens and a wide angle lens, where the iPhone 7 just had that single camera lens. So again, a little bit of a difference. I don't think it's that big of a deal breaker, but it is something to consider. It's one of those things you're going to have to kind of get used to, having a single camera versus having that dual camera. But I think everything else is perfectly fine between these two, and I'm a huge fan of these cameras for sure. Now that pretty much covers it up in terms of the outside. Other than that, there's really not much else that's different. They're kind of rocking the same thing. Now, kind of moving forward, the software experience is going to be exactly the same. They're going to be getting the exact same versions of software from now until the end of their time, because they came out the same year and because they have the same, chipsets and all that stuff. They're going to be more similar than not. So you're not really going to have that big of a difference when it comes down to this thing either. So that covers it up there. The battery life was the other big thing. That's probably the bigger difference between these two. The iPhone 7 Plus has a much bigger size battery. One of the bigger, I think it was the biggest size battery at that time when this phone came out. The 7 had a good size battery too. The battery life was pretty good on these when it first came out in 2016. Right now it is a little bit outdated because they're smaller and all that stuff. So that's another slight difference you're going to have to remember. So in terms of that, that covers it up there. Now let's go and do a speed comparison between these two. They have the same Apple A10 Fusion chip inside, but the biggest difference is that the iPhone 7 Plus had 3 gigs of RAM. The iPhone 7 has 2 gigs of RAM. So let's go and see which phone is faster between these two. Okay, there we go. All the apps are cleared out in the background, as you guys can see on this one as well. So let's get into it. Let's do phone calls, 3, 2, 1. And I think the iPhone 7 may have been a little bit faster there. Hopping out of this one, music, 3, 2, 1. And this app is always a little weird, so I don't want to go to this one like that much. App Store, 3, 2, 1. And you can see the iPhone 7 a little bit faster there again. Very surprising. The 7 Plus, maybe there's an issue with the 7 Plus. I have no idea. It's glitching up like crazy on that one though. And scrolling speeds, they're both are roughly around the same. There's not really that big of a difference there, at least as I can tell. Hopping out of this app. Let's get into cameras, 3, 2, 1. And about the same here too. There's not that big of a difference. Photos, 3, 2, 1. About the same thing, not that big of a difference there. iTunes Store, 3, 2, 1, which I don't even know why they still have this app in here, to be honest. And it looks like the iPhone 7 may have been a little bit faster. 7 Plus a little bit behind. Hopping out of this one. Let's do news, 3, 2, 1. And you can see the iPhone 7 Plus a bit behind or a bit forward. The iPhone 7 was a little bit behind. Hopping out of this one. As always, I have a bunch of these third-party apps we can go and test out. Let's do Temple Run, 2, 3, 2, 1. And we do have a pop-up on here, so we'll give this one maybe like an extra second. Okay, now we're going to give it like an extra while, which I don't know why I would even have to sign in again because I was already signed in before, so it doesn't make any sense, these apps. Fruit Ninja, 3, 2, 1. I wonder if I'm going to have to do the same thing here. and a pop-up here, but they kind of did the same thing at the same time. So even here, I don't really think there would be that big of a difference between these two. New Real Racing 3, 3, 2, 1, and I do feel like I'm gonna have to input something on my 7, so we'll just see how it goes. And of course, we have another pop-up. So this one is kind of butchered, to be honest, because of these these pop-ups that keep happening on this device. And we can do Nova Legacy 321. Now this is a pretty big intensive game, so I'm curious to see how they kind of prepare. Now the 7 did have that pop-up, so we'll give this like an extra second or two, but nothing super crazy. And even then, I think so. Even then, the iPhone 7 still did pretty good. It was it was forward ahead of the iPhone 7 Plus, even with that pop up, which is pretty impressive. So this loading time, I mean, this is a pretty intensive game. So it's not going to load up in like 1 second. But to be honest, that is good enough in and of itself. So they're both pretty much doing the same thing. I don't want to waste you guys' time, but essentially this one kind of covered it up. I mean, I think they're both kind of the same. I think the 7 did a pretty good job in some areas too. The 7 Plus did a great job as well. I don't think one was way faster, but the RAM management portion would have been better on the 7 Plus because it has more RAM. So in terms of that, that covers it up there. Now let's go and hit on the cameras. Now the 7 Plus has that dual camera setup, a wide angle lens and a telephoto lens. The iPhone 7 has that single wide angle lens. And when it comes down to it, it really just depends, do you like having more lenses? Do you like having the ability to zoom in a lot more and zoom out a lot more? The 7 Plus is definitely the way to go. The 7's camera is still good enough, if you're doing just Snapchats and Instagram stories and stuff, but the 7 Plus is the one I would always prefer. Like I mentioned, it was the camera I used for a while. The front cameras are exactly the same thing, so same resolutions, you can film in. So there's not really that big of a difference there either. So you're pretty much rocking the same thing on the front. It just so happens that the back is the bigger difference, and the 7 Plus definitely wins in terms of that back camera. So now to kind of answer the question, should you buy an iPhone 7 or should you buy an iPhone 7 Plus? Well, this is what I'll tell you. Definitely, I would highly recommend you guys to pick up an iPhone 7 Plus over the iPhone 7 if the size isn't that big of a deal. If you can rock the same size, like if you're okay rocking like a smaller or a bigger size, I'd say go for it. The 7 Plus is a great phone. It has a lot going for it. I love this phone a lot. It is easily one of my favorite phones of all time. And it's one of those devices that I pick up time and time again and I look at it, I'm like, wow, this is a really good phone still. Although it looks outdated, it's still a great phone and I'm in love with this phone for sure. I used it as a main device a couple years ago and I loved it then too and I still like it. The 7 on the other hand, I think is a very good phone too. If you can't have a bigger sized phone, then I guess this is the next bigger option that you have. But I'm somebody that I like having the bigger size battery. I like having the more capabilities with a bigger phone. And if the same features and same battery life for the most part was on this phone, then I would use this one for sure. But I do like having a bigger size, but the 7 is still a very good phone too, and I have very little complaints about this phone as well. So in terms of that, that covers it up there. If you guys have any other questions, if you want to pick these things up, like I mentioned, links are down in the description. You can get that from there and help support the channel at the same time. Hit the like button if you guys enjoy the video, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.